Today, September 7th, 2021, this has come out. The first 4 Star Trek movies on 4K Blu-ray. Does it make a difference? Is it worth it? We'll find out after the jump.
Movies, TV, music.
Oh, fancy meeting you here, people of YouTube. My name is Elon Osborne, and this is my channel where I talk about movies, audio, and music. And as I said, today we're going to be talking about Star Trek, the OG Star Trek. We'll just jump right into it. Does the 4K even really make much of a difference? This time around, it has once again been remastered. At least the picture quality has. So let's take a look at some screen captures provided by capsaholic.com, thank you very much, and see if it really made a difference. So as we take a look at here, here's the 4K version. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a bit washed out. That's kind of what the general consensus is that I get from any type of comparison to 1080p. There's just this kind of whitewashed look about 1080p that you just don't really get with 4K because of HDR. Because you've got deeper blacks, you've got lighter lights, so that kind of helps get rid of that washed out look that 1080p might have. So it is pretty apparent with this particular screenshot. You've got some darker darks. This particular collection is in Dolby Vision as well as 4K resolution. So moving on, we got Spock here in 4K. And as you can see, a little bit more washed out. The skin tones are a little bit more washed out. But as far as the resolution itself, as far as 4K actually boosting any sort of 4K crispiness, as you might call it, it honestly doesn't really do that much with this particular remaster. The 1080p actually looks great. And since this comes with both 4K and 1080p versions, and they have both been remastered, the difference between, because this is actually, this 1080p that you're seeing here is actually from, I think it was 2013 when the last remaster came out for Blu-ray. So this is going back and forth between those versions. So it's about 7-8 years old. But the difference between the 1080p that you get in this collection and the 4K is not that big a difference, almost at all. So really, the only difference you're going to get is if you have a really nice 4K TV. And honestly, if you have OLED. If you have an OLED TV, that's when you're going to start to notice even more the difference between 1080p and 4K because of the HDR. Not necessarily because of the resolution. You're not going to get an overwhelming difference between the resolution of 1080p and 4K this time around. It's mainly because of the HDR. That's where you're going to see the most difference. So we got this shot here in 4K, and yeah, once again, it's just a little bit more washed out. It does look brighter, that's true, but it's just a little bit more washed out. You've got more vivid colors. But I mean, going back and forth between the two, some of you might like the 1080p version better. You might like a brighter scene, and I totally get that. Skin tones are actually really good. It's a little bit warmer. As you can see this, it's a little bit cooler. The highlights are a little bit more washed out. So as you can see, it just kind of evens out the skin tones with Dolby Vision and HDR, but not a huge difference. I mean, yeah, it just looks warmer. But as far as the detail is concerned, yeah, almost no difference whatsoever. You can actually see a little bit more grain in the 4K version than you can in the 1080p version. Here's this shot here. Yeah, you've got a little bit more magenta in the 1080p version. So once again, skin tones are better represented in the 4K version. But yeah, not a lot of difference in the resolution. It actually looks like the 1080p. You can actually see Kirk's face a little bit better. Once again, we have 4K, 1080p. Honestly, the 1080p looks better. It looks honestly better in this particular shot because this one looks pretty muted. You see more of the film grain than you do in the 1080p version. This one's brighter. So honestly, that was the consensus with all 4 of these movies is when I was watching them. You've got certain shots that look way out of focus, which we'll get to in a minute. and the 1080p looks better. But then you have certain shots where the 4K actually does justice to the darks and the lights. So here's one particular shot that really isn't that much different at all. 1080p, 4K, 1080p, 4K. Yeah, it just looks a little bit darker. That's about it. The 4K version, once again, you can see the film grain a little bit more. It doesn't look like they tried to artificially get rid of any of the film grain or the noise. This particular shot, holy cow, look at how insanely out of focus it is. Wow. And the 1080p is not much better. It's brighter. I mean, obviously there's a better difference between the darks and the spectral highlight here with that electricity coming down in the 4K version. But man, it's just a sign of the times, really. Back then, the ability to focus on a particular scene just wasn't as advanced as it is today, for sure. And once again, you might like the 1080p version better here just because it is a little bit brighter. The shadows aren't as dark, because this just looks awful. So dark, so out of focus. Yeah, the 4K shot looks great, but I kind of like the 1080p better. Kind of like how the shadows aren't as shadowy. And once again, you can see a little bit more of the film grain with the 4K version. Yeah, I think I like the 1080p better. Here's just an effects shot. I don't think anything real is in this particular shot. Once again, not much of a difference. The 1080p version is a little bit brighter. Yeah, I think I like the 1080p again. 4K, Spock. Now this one you can see the skin tones are a little bit better. So that's good. Like I said, the skin tones are better represented in the 4K version, but if you're a fan of properly represented skin tones, all right, then this 4K remaster is for you. Otherwise, yeah, it's not much different. Got a real dark shot, some pretty good spectral highlights with that building in the distance, but yeah, the 1080p version is just a little bit brighter overall. So red. And now, yeah, that is just way too much saturation. In my opinion, they tried real hard to try and fix the fact that it was just a really dark scene. So I do like how everything is a little bit more evened out in the 4K version. See a little bit more detail. And I know those are shots only from the motion picture, the first one, but that's honestly what you get for the first 4 movies as a whole. Some shots are pretty darn clear, but when you compare it to the 1080p version, there's not much of a difference when it comes to just raw resolution and pixels. The only difference you're really gonna see is with HDR and Dolby Vision. So if that's really the reason you wanna buy this, then yes, go ahead, because it does look pretty good with darker darks and lighter lights and better skin tones. But otherwise, just a pixel for pixel comparison to the 1080p and this new 4K version, not much difference. And now talking about audio, nothing happened. They didn't do anything. The other Blu-ray remaster that came out about a decade ago was 7.1 Dolby True HD. And this one is also 7.1 Dolby True HD. So it didn't get an Atmos upmix or anything. This is purely just a 4K resolution remaster. This is purely just a 4K resolution remaster and HDR bump. So other than that, there's not much I can tell you. I do personally have a Dolby Atmos system that I watched it on, but there wasn't a lot of dynamic shifts or just a lot going on sonically anyway. You know, sometimes during the action scenes, there was some pretty good bass representation and bass extension, but nothing that totally wowed me. And again, that's probably just a sign of the times, since this was made, you know, early 70s through mid 80s. So yeah, it was kind of disappointing that this didn't get an audio upgrade at all. As far as the packaging is concerned, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that you've got this colorful package. Focus, pretty cool artwork, some screenshots on the back. But the case itself, just kind of standard. All the discs are black, because black is so cool. And then you got just your basic Blu-ray case as well. Same artwork on the front. You got your discs. And because of the size of the 1080p files, that's where you're going to find all your bonus content. But as far as your bonus content is concerned, there's really not much new there either. Just looking at the paperwork that got sent to me with this collection, really the only thing new is that there's an isolated score track in Dolby 2.0 for the first one, the motion picture. Other than that, I think it's all just stuff that's been available on previous versions. So this is the only way that you can actually get the 4K versions, is if you get the collection of both 4K and Blu-ray, although they will be selling the Blu-ray versions individually as well. And honestly, like I said, those actually look really good. They were both remastered. This 4K version and 1080p version were both remastered from the same scan. So the Blu-ray actually looks really good. And it's got the same audio track as the 4K version too. So I know this was released because of the 55th anniversary of the first Star Trek. But in all honesty, other than the fact that it's been 55 years, I wasn't really impressed with the result of it being in 4K. Like I said, some of the shots look better than 1080p and some of them look worse. So the fact that it's kind of hit or miss just didn't sit with me very well, you know? So maybe in a few years, maybe for the 60th anniversary, they might re-release it again on 4K with a Dolby Atmos upmixed version, who knows? Or maybe there's going to be a really nice Steelbook version with some more bonus content that was not included on this. That's going to come in a couple years maybe, who knows? So maybe if you want to hold out for that and you still want to get the Blu-ray versions of this particular scan, that's probably a good bet. But real talk, I'm honestly kind of confused why Paramount decided to release this, other than the fact that it's the 55th anniversary, but why? So there you have it, folks. Just my thoughts on the new 4K remastered version of the first 4 Star Trek movies. So what do you think? Are you just a diehard Star Trek fan and you're gonna get it anyway just to have it in your collection? Cool. Are you maybe just gonna get the Blu-ray version by itself? Awesome. Or are you just gonna skip it altogether because it's not an entirely dramatic difference? Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch TV shows and movies, experience them. And of course, always be listening.